My name is Nicole. Standing in my own kitchen, sipping a cup of tea, I feel a sense of peace that I've never experienced before. It all started on that fateful Christmas Eve, a moment that changed my life forever. I remember the moment I landed in Maui on Christmas morning. The warm air hit me like a gentle embrace, a stark contrast to the cold and suffocating atmosphere back home. I collected my bag and found the shuttle to the hotel. As I rode along, watching the palm trees pass by, I realized I had given myself a precious gift, the silence inside my own head. For the first time in years, there were no mental lists, no anxiety about what others needed from me. I checked into my hotel room. It was small, but the view of the ocean was breathtaking. I stood on the balcony for nearly 20 minutes, just gazing at the water. The ocean in Maui had a color that photographs could never truly capture, a deep, shifting blue-green that changed with the light. By the evening, my phone had 31 missed calls. My father had called 7 times, my brother Ethan 9 times, and my mother had left 4 voicemails. Each voicemail from my mother was more dramatic than the last. The first was filled with confusion, the second with irritation, the third was tearful in a way that seemed more for show, and the fourth was a jumbled mess of all those emotions, ending with, "I don't know what's gotten into you, Nicole, but this isn't how family behaves." I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed, sipping a glass of pineapple juice, and listened to all of them. When the last one ended, I put the phone on the nightstand and didn't call anyone back. Instead, I texted my cousin Lily, the only person in my family I really trusted. Lily was 26, smart and observant, and she had watched me endure my family's unreasonable demands for years. I sent her a photo of the view from my balcony and a simple message, "I'm in Maui. Merry Christmas." She called me back in less than a minute, laughing so hard she could barely speak. She told me what had happened at the house. Ethan had called their aunt asking if she could bring food. My father had ordered expensive catering at the last minute and was furious about the cost. 3 of Ethan's friends had left early because the atmosphere was so tense. My mother had cried at the dinner table, not because she missed me, but because the evening hadn't gone as she'd planned. As I listened to Lily, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. I knew I had made the right decision. Those 4 days in Maui were a revelation. On the second day, I rented a bicycle and rode along the coastal path until my legs ached. On the third day, I went on a snorkeling tour and spent 2 hours floating above a reef, watching fish in colors I couldn't even name. On the fourth day, I did nothing but sit on the beach and read a novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. It was during these days that I finally understood something I'd been struggling with for years. I'd grown up in a family where love was transactional. My family in Chicago, a well-to-do but demanding bunch, had taught me that my worth was measured by how useful I was. If I cooked, cleaned, and took care of everyone's needs, I would be loved. But those 4 days in Maui showed me that I'd been investing in a system that would never pay me back. Let me rewind to that Christmas Eve. I'd driven 3 hours from Detroit to my parents' house, thinking I was going to have a quiet family Christmas. I'd taken days off work, bought gifts, and wrapped them carefully. I arrived at the house on December 24th, still in my coat from the drive. I was standing in the kitchen when my father walked in. My father, a successful businessman with a domineering personality, had that look on his face that I'd learned to fear since childhood. It wasn't anger, it was a slow, satisfied smirk that meant he'd already made a decision and was just informing me. He leaned against the counter, crossed his arms, and said, "Ethan's friends are spending Christmas here. It's only 30 people. You'll handle the cooking and the setup." There was no question, no please, just a statement. Ethan was standing behind him in the doorway. I looked at him, hoping to see some sign of discomfort, some indication that he understood how crazy this was. But he just nodded, as if it was all settled and I was already the hired help. I stood there, my coat still on, my bag over my shoulder. 30 people on Christmas Eve, with less than 24 hours' notice. My father had said, it's only 30 people, as if it was just a small favor, ignoring the fact that it was my entire holiday, my rest, my time, and my dignity. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, my co-worker Maya had mentioned a last-minute deal on flights to Maui. I'd laughed it off at the time, not really serious about it. But out of curiosity, I'd looked it up and even took a screenshot. I'd saved the airline's number in my phone. That night, standing in the kitchen, looking at my father's smirk and Ethan's nod, I felt something inside me shift. It was like a door closing quietly and permanently. I gave a small, private smile and said, "Okay. Let me just freshen up." I went upstairs to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my phone. The flight was still available. There was one seat left on a red-eye departing Detroit at 11:30 that night, arriving in Maui the next morning. It cost more than I'd planned to spend, but I didn't care. I booked the flight in under 5 minutes. Then I texted Maya, who had been to Maui 3 times and knew exactly which hotel to recommend. She replied instantly with a hotel name, a rate, and the words, "You're finally doing something for yourself." I booked the hotel for 4 nights with an ocean view. I sat there, looking at the confirmation emails coming in one after another, and felt a relief so intense it almost hurt. I went back downstairs with my bag still packed and told my father and Ethan that I'd forgotten something important in Detroit and needed to go back quickly and would return in a couple of hours. My father didn't even look up from the television, and Ethan was already on his phone. They never suspected I was lying, never thought that the woman they'd taken for granted for so long might be leaving their lives that Christmas. I drove to the airport in a calm state. There was no second guessing, no guilt, and no rehearsing of apologies in my head. I parked the car, checked my bag, and sat in the terminal, eating an overpriced sandwich with a ginger ale. It was one of the best meals I'd ever had, not because of the food, but because of what it represented, freedom. My phone started ringing around 9 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 9:45, then my mother called, followed by Ethan, and then a couple of numbers I didn't recognize, which I assumed were Ethan's friends wondering where the food was. I turned my phone to silent, put it in my bag, and watched the departures board until my gate was posted. When they arrived at the house on Christmas morning and found an empty kitchen, I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, wrapped in a thin airline blanket, watching the sun rise through the window. When I flew home, I felt different. My friend Maya noticed it right away when I walked into the office after the holidays. She said something about my face had changed, that I seemed less braced, like I'd stopped waiting for the next blow. In January, my father called one more time. I answered. He talked for several minutes about disappointment, responsibility, and what family meant. When he finished, I spoke clearly and firmly, saying that I wouldn't be the service staff at future family events. I told him that my time was as valuable as anyone else's in the family, and if that was hard for him to accept, we could re-evaluate our relationship. He hung up. I put the phone down, made myself a cup of tea, and stood in my kitchen. I finally felt at peace, like I'd finally seen myself clearly for the first time. That Christmas Eve smile was the beginning of a new me, and I was never going back.